They hated him so much that even a single laugh on the screen could send a chill down their spine. Richard Widmark entered Hollywood with his very first role, but it landed like a straight punch to the audience's nerves. Tommy Udo, a feral grin, dead eyes. And the moment he shoved an elderly woman in a wheelchair down a flight of stairs, turned him into the most terrifying villain of that era. People believed Widmark was born to play evil, and Hollywood did everything it could to lock him inside that box. But that was only the surface. Behind the cold face of film noir and the gunshots on screen was someone entirely different. A man disciplined to the point of severity, someone who despised real-life violence, openly supported gun control, and left behind almost no romantic scandal throughout decades of fame. A devil on screen, yet the kindest and most private man his colleagues ever met. And then the real tragedy wasn't in the movies at all. It was inside his home. A younger brother returning from war like a broken shadow, a beloved wife slowly losing her memory to Alzheimer's, and the choice to walk away from the spotlight to care for her until her final breath. Richard Widmark didn't collapse on a film set. He collapsed in silence, the same way he lived. So who was Richard Widmark really? A Hollywood devil? Or a man trapped his entire life between two opposing images, fame that made him known, and pain that made him old? And to understand how a man could generate such terrifying energy on screen, yet remain private, disciplined, even somewhat harsh with himself in real life, we have to go back to where everything began, an upbringing that was anything but stable. Widmark grew up through one move after another, as if life had taught him early that he was never allowed to hold on to anything for too long. Richard Widmark was born on December 26, 1914, in Sunrise Township, Minnesota, into a working-class family with a multicultural background. His father, Carl Henry Widmark, was a traveling salesman, a job that meant the family almost never stayed in one place. His mother, Ethel May, had an artistic inclination and once did work connected to creative illustration. But in a household constantly forced to chase survival, that art sometimes remained only as a small light to cling to. Richard was the eldest, and later came his younger brother Donald. The bond between the two brothers was so strong that in later years, whenever people spoke of the family's turning points, Richard's shadow was always there, as the big brother who had to grow up earlier than his age. Widmark's childhood unfolded on the road. The family left Minnesota, moved to South Dakota, then drifted into Illinois. Every new address meant a new school, new friends, new introductions, and then another goodbye. That rhythm shaped a very particular personality in him. Quiet, observant, always keeping just enough distance so he wouldn't be torn apart when it was time to leave again. What's striking is this. Instead of rebelling, Widmark learned endurance and self-adjustment. He became older in the way he looked at life, like someone who always kept an emotional exit route ready. Cinema entered Widmark's life as a legitimate hiding place. Some stories suggest his grandmother took him to the movies when he was very young. And from that point on, the theater became one of the few places that felt stable. Night after night was still night. The screen was always bright, and the story followed its own order. As he grew older, he became drawn to films with eerie, dramatic atmospheres. That feeling, half fear, half curiosity, quietly trained him to hold an audience through psychology, not through beautiful dialogue. Eventually, the family became more settled when they established themselves in Princeton, Illinois. His father opened a bakery, and for the first time in his life, Richard lived somewhere long enough to understand what home meant. At Princeton High School, Widmark did well academically, played sports, and stood out for his ability to express himself in front of crowds, an ability that was not innate, but built through an entire childhood of constant adaptation, constant rapid integration. Yet just when everything seemed to finally stop moving, the family fractured again. His parents separated during his high school years. That event didn't explode outward like a loud scandal. It was more like a crack running through the foundation, silent but persistent. What's remarkable is that his mother stayed in Princeton to raise the two boys, making sure Richard's education did not break apart. No one ever took credit in this story, but that perseverance and sacrifice planted a trait in Widmark that would follow him for life. If you do something, you see it through, and once you choose, you are not allowed to quit halfway. In 1932, Richard graduated high school and received a scholarship to Lake Forest College. At first, he aimed toward law, a safe, respectable path for a serious young man. But college opened another door: the stage and the art of public speaking. Widmark studied speech-art communication and became deeply involved in theater. It was not a loud turning point, but once he turned completely, because he realized he had a strange gift: standing before an audience and controlling what they felt. For someone who had spent his entire childhood observing to survive, acting became a paradoxical kind of power. For the first time, he wasn't adjusting to his environment. He was making the environment adjust to him. He graduated in 1936 and even stayed at the college for a time in a teaching support role in speech and drama. But Widmark was not the kind of man born to remain inside comfort. By 1938, he left Illinois for New York, a jump that could be seen as reckless, yet perfectly aligned with who he was. Once he moved toward the harshest arena of opportunity. And in New York, he didn't go straight to film. He took the long way through radio and theater, where voice, timing, and the ability to create tension with nothing but breath were sharpened to the edge of a blade. That period became the furnace that forged Richard Widmark. Hollywood did not create him. The years of disciplined training in radio and theater created a man tough enough, deep enough, precise enough, so that when he finally stepped into cinema, a single laugh in Kiss of Death was enough to stamp his name into history. New York didn't welcome Richard Widmark with a red carpet, but with the city's roar. Cramped rented rooms, cold auditions, and the sensation of being swallowed by a place that didn't care who you were. And yet, strangely, it suited Widmark. A man raised on endless relocations had long been used to stepping into new worlds without anyone holding out a hand. In 1938, he left Illinois for New York like a gamble. No noise, no showmanship, only determination. And instead of rushing straight into film, Widmark chose the harder path, the one that forged people: radio. Radio became his first door, and the place where Widmark revealed an unusual acting instinct. Without a face, without eyes, with nothing but voice. He joined radio dramas and soap operas, with Aunt Jenny's real-life stories often cited as his first major role. A crucial milestone, because in those days, radio was its own underground empire of influence, a place where audiences saw through imagination, and actors had to build entire scenes using breath alone. Widmark did what many failed to do. He turned sound into image. His voice was firm yet vibrating with tension, as if every word carried weight, and pulled the listener forward. By the early 1940s, Widmark had almost become a true working machine. The transcript describes him as one of the busiest voices of that era, something that sounds like praise. But to insiders, it also meant a life that allowed no weakness. He ran multiple shows in a single day, switched studios like changing battlefields, stepped into one role and immediately shed it to jump into another. Front-page Farrell gave him the speed of a reporter living on urgency. The shadow and inner sanctum mysteries forced him to create darkness through tone alone, and suspense trained his ability to hold audiences in that held breath state. Miss the rhythm by even a second, and you lose them. Radio taught Widmark a brutal discipline. No extra word, no broken beat, and emotion had to be controlled like a blade. Sharp, exact, deep enough. In those years, Widmark earned an income that could shock anyone still haunted by the Great Depression. About $100,000 a year, according to the transcript, a number that speaks for his standing in broadcasting. But wealth wasn't what made Widmark feel secure. If anything, money meant you became property of the machine. Constantly called, tightly scheduled, sought after for his voice, and forced into daily perfection. And inside that mandatory perfection, Widmark developed a ruthless, professional nervous system. He could not tolerate sloppiness, could not stand careless work, because radio doesn't allow you to hide behind presence. Wrong is wrong, empty is empty. The audience will hear the fake immediately. Then the war pushed America into an entirely different state of mind. Widmark wanted to enlist, but his body rejected him in the cruelest way. A perforated, ruptured eardrum disqualified him. For many men, rejection meant being left outside a historic moment. For Widmark, it became a feeling of being trapped, wanting to move with his era, yet forbidden. That contradiction drove him harder into art, almost like repayment for helplessness. If he couldn't go to war, he would fight through performance. Stage work and tours meant to lift soldiers' spirits. In 1943, he made his Broadway debut in Kiss and Tell, a comedy directed by George Abbott, opening on March 17, 1943, and becoming a major hit with an exceptionally long run. Broadway at that time was not a place for the faint-hearted. Live theater exposes every flaw, and every night is a test of both body and mind. Widmark stepped into it with the force of someone already forged into steel by radio, precise in role, precise in rhythm, able to hold an audience through restraint. A restraint that later became the reason his criminals and extremists felt so frightening. The terror wasn't in shouting. It was in how calm he could be. But the real drama of this stage wasn't under Broadway lights. It was in Widmark, throwing himself into performances for the military and the USO. Places with no beautiful halls, no polite order, only exhausted faces fresh from the battlefield, noise, unpredictability, and an atmosphere where an artist had to fight for the right to be heard. It was a harsh environment strong enough to crush anyone's ego. The audience wasn't there to honor art. They were there to survive one more night. And Widmark learned the most important lesson for his future in cinema. If you want people to stay with you, you have to be real. You have to hit the nerve, and you have to pull them in. From radio and Broadway, Widmark emerged with a foundation Hollywood rarely sees. An actor built not by luck, but by discipline. He wasn't a star pampered from the beginning. Before the camera, before the studio lights, he had already lived under daily trials, already learned the rule: hit the rhythm or disappear. And that was why, when film finally came calling, Widmark didn't enter Hollywood like a man begging for a chance. He entered like someone who had been tempered long enough to turn a role into a weapon. After years of being sharpened in radio and Broadway, like steel kept under constant heat, Widmark entered cinema in a way Hollywood was psychologically unprepared to absorb. His first film role, yet one of the most explosive moments in noir history. In 1947, Kiss of Death gave him Tommy Udo, a killer with a feral grin, a laugh both high-pitched and cold, scraping the nerves like metal. It wasn't just playing evil. It was a kind of evil with a sick magnetism. something that made people shudder, yet couldn't look away. And in a single scene, Widmark permanently branded himself into public memory. Tommy Udo ties an elderly woman to her wheelchair and sends her straight down a staircase. The woman was played by Mildred Dunnock. Audiences in 1947 had never seen violence executed with that kind of smile. No blood displayed, yet the impact felt like the world had tilted on its axis. The villain didn't hide, didn't hesitate, didn't even tremble. He seemed to, enjoy it. The cruel irony is that this explosion almost never happened. Henry Hathaway didn't want Widmark. He thought Widmark was too intellectual. The high forehead and composed appearance made the character feel less like a street thug. But Darryl F. Zanuck saw what Hathaway didn't. Something strange, pulsing beneath the polish. Widmark was pushed into a second chance, and he understood it as a life-or-death moment. He didn't try to turn himself into a conventional tough guy. He did the opposite. He used his very oddness as a weapon, turning the laugh into the most frightening element of all. When Tommy Udo laughed, it wasn't entertainment. It was a warning signal that violence could drop at any second, irrationally, suddenly, without cause. The result was almost immediate. Widmark earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor and won a Golden Globe as Most Promising Newcomer. A man who had stepped from stage to film set less than a year earlier had reached a summit countless actors chase for a lifetime. But the psychological cost of that leap revealed itself just as fast. The transcript says that the first time Widmark saw himself on screen, he was shocked, horrified. It wasn't just embarrassment at an unfamiliar image. It was closer to panic at realizing this. The person he had created on screen might be stronger than the man he was off it. A role, yet also a cruel double, exposing a darkness he wasn't sure he wanted to own. From that moment on, Hollywood began to see Widmark as a dangerous face, a face capable of turning society's unease into art. In 1948, he threw himself into a rapid string of roles, as if proving Tommy Udo wasn't an accident. In The Street with No Name, Widmark played Alex Stiles, a gang boss who didn't need to shout to thicken the air. What made Stiles terrifying was control, intelligent, calculating, cold, like someone who knew exactly which sentence would break which person. That same year, Roadhouse continued to feed the image of Widmark as a man who could stand under bright lights while carrying darkness with him. Then he shifted into Western territory with Yellow Sky, acting opposite Gregory Peck and Ann Baxter. Here, Widmark wasn't the crazy villain anymore. He revealed a different kind of threat, sharp, fast, cunning, like a blade hidden inside a coat, the kind of character who could betray you in the blink of an eye. By 1949, Fox began to worry. They understood that if Widmark stayed trapped in villain roles, he would become the embodiment of evil and never escape. So Down to the Sea in Ships arrived as a calculated image cleanse, moving him toward hero territory, testing him as a leading man. Yet what's fascinating is this. Even when playing the good guy, Widmark never felt completely safe. There was always a tension in him, as if radio had taught him never to relax, and noir had taught him that human beings can always slip. 1950 was the year Widmark proved he didn't belong only to dark frames. He could become the center of a true existential tragedy. Night in the City gave him Harry Fabian, a desperate man running as if hunted by fate. The harder he fights, the tighter he strangles himself. This wasn't a gangster-type villain. This was failure as a human being, someone who dreams too big with no road to get there. Widmark made the audience ache with every breath, because you hate Fabian's slippery nature, yet you understand he's running simply to live. That same year, he appeared in Elia Kazan's Panic in the Streets, a disease drama shot on location in New Orleans. No glamorous studios. The camera went out into the street. The reality of the setting made everything rougher, more raw. And Widmark had to rely on exactly what radio discipline had trained into him: timing, tension, pressure, clamping down on the character like steel. And then came No Way Out, the role of Ray Biddle, a vicious racist. This was the kind of role that could make an actor hated off screen, and Widmark didn't want it. But once he accepted it, he didn't soften it for safety. He made it as uncomfortable as it needed to be. And precisely because it was that heavy, the scenes where Widmark had to spit cruel words at Sidney Poitier became a real mental ordeal. The transcript mentions that after every scene, Widmark would apologize to Poitier, making sure he understood it was acting, and from that tension they became friends. Poitier later said Widmark was the first person in Hollywood to invite him to dinner. Small detail, heavy meaning, because it shows Widmark's human instinct always existed separately from the violent shadow he carried on screen. In just 3 short years, Widmark went from a man who had never made a film to a new noir symbol, a face powerful enough to belong to every genre. Gangster, Western, tragedy, epidemic drama, social film. But what makes this journey compelling isn't the speed, it's the paradox. The more famous he became for violence and darkness, the more clearly he revealed an off-screen character defined by discipline and moral boundaries, as if cinema allowed him to release the most frightening part so that in real life he could keep himself standing upright. If the years 1947-1950 branded Richard Widmark with an haunting smile and roles that made audiences afraid, yet unable to look away, then from 1951 onward, he stepped into a more dangerous territory: versatility. Widmark refused to remain trapped inside the noir face Hollywood had only just built around him. He shattered that frame by moving straight into other kinds of darkness: the darkness of war, the coldness of the era, fractured psychology, and moral conflicts with no clean exit. The Frogmen placed him inside the steel discipline of the UDT, the forerunners of the Navy SEALs. This wasn't a war film built to chant slogans. It carried the tension of life and death. Miss a beat, and you die. Widmark appeared as a commander who didn't need to be carved into a heroic statue. Only a burden of responsibility pressed into his face. Halls of Montezuma pushed him again into the Pacific, but with a more brutal edge. The film stayed with the psychological. Price, headaches, exhaustion, the need to lean on painkillers just to stay upright. Widmark was no longer playing a hero. He was playing a human being trying not to break, while something around him kept breaking first. Then he turned toward the most dangerous tension of all: psychological tension. Don't bother to knock locked Widmark beside Marilyn Monroe inside an almost sealed space where Monroe's instability felt like a ticking bomb. Widmark created a cold, steady normality so that abnormality could become real fear. He described Monroe as a fragile soul, and on set she often disappeared for hours into her dressing room, forgot lines, leaving the entire crew waiting in helpless frustration. Strangely, once on screen, all that chaos turned into a hypnotic light. Widmark also flatly denied the romance rumors. There was no familiar Hollywood game here, only work, and a distance he enforced with discipline. In 1953, Pickup on South Street pulled him back into what Widmark understood best: the fear of the era itself. The Cold War turned even the smallest object into a reason to kill, and his Skip McCoy, an amoral yet clear-eyed pickpocket, threw the entire decade back in its own face. With one bitter line: "Are you waving the flag at me?" It wasn't treason. It was the sneer of the bottom layer of society. They don't have the privilege to romanticize politics. They only know survival. Then came Broken Lance, a major project with Spencer Tracy and Robert Wagner, and Widmark entered it with a quiet fatigue, not tired from failure, but tired from being swallowed by the factory line of fame. That milestone also closed out his 7-year contract with Fox, like a clear signal. He no longer wanted to be manufactured as a commodity. And so Widmark chose the harder road, the life of an independent actor. He founded Heath Productions, without using his own name as a display, but naming it after his daughter Anne Heath Widmark's middle name, a small detail that revealed his real priorities. Time limit became a crucial step, with Widmark both acting and producing, pulled deep into the gray zone morality he loved. Human beings are not allowed to be beautiful in simple ways. Warlock continued that spirit in the role of Johnny Gannon, a man trying to stand on the side of law, yet the past still leaks through every glance and every silence, as if the hardest thing wasn't shooting a gun, but stopping himself from slipping back into old instinct. When he entered the Alamo 1960 as Jim Bowie, the challenge wasn't only the battlefield, it was the suspicious gaze of John Wayne. Wayne didn't believe Widmark was big enough to carry Bowie. Widmark didn't respond with noise. He responded by working his. Bowie came alive as a man both hard and tired, both rational and pulled by honor, knowing the battle could not be won, yet staying because pride demanded it. Judgment at Nuremberg moved him from gunfire into a courtroom of conscience, where the question of responsibility after war left no one able to hide behind, "I was just following orders." In that same rhythm, two rode together placed him inside a set stretched tight as wire, John Ford and Jimmy Stewart constantly fighting. Yet Widmark held his ground through the professional instinct that had become his backbone. Discipline, seriousness, and a belief that if even one person treats cinema like a game, the entire collective will be dragged down. As the 1960s began, Richard Widmark was no longer a man who had to prove his worth one role at a time. He had become a kind of weight in Hollywood. Once he appeared, the film automatically carried seriousness, gravity, credibility. Yet the paradox was this. The more firmly he stood inside the system, the more clearly he could see how that system ran on the very things he despised most. Inflated egos, quiet power games, and above all, a habit of treating professional discipline as optional. Widmark was not a man who exploded loudly. He reacted in a far more frightening way: silence, coldness, and a refusal to forgive carelessness. That friction became unmistakable in 1964 on The Long Ships, when he acted alongside Tony Curtis. Curtis belonged to the type of star who always knew the camera loved him, stylish, beautiful, and easily capable of turning a set into a stage for display. Widmark was the opposite. He walked onto set like a soldier entering a mission, precise, restrained, never wasting a movement. The tension between them wasn't personal hatred. It came from something Widmark found intolerable, someone placing himself above the work, an attitude that, to Widmark, bordered on insult. The following year, in 1965, Widmark reunited with Sidney Poitier in the Bedford incident. And this time, there was no longer the heavy moral debt that had hung over them during No Way Out, but a mature respect. The film carried the suffocating cold of the Cold War. Everything could ignite because of one human mistake, and Widmark didn't need to do much at all. Simply standing in the frame was enough to make unease crawl up the audience's spine. By 1968, the detective placed Widmark opposite Frank Sinatra, and this was where the whispers about a list of people Widmark didn't like began to cling to his name. Not out of jealousy. Widmark wasn't the kind of man who lived on envy. The problem was that Sinatra represented what Widmark was allergic to: charisma used like a pass out of discipline, arriving late, preparing casually, wanting to rush the shoot and be done. For many, that was the privilege of a star. For Widmark, it was a way of killing a scene from the inside. From this period on, Widmark became even more like an irreplaceable pillar. He could move between film and television without losing value. In 1971, Vanished cast him as the President of the United States, a role that demanded no showmanship, but required a very specific authority. And an Emmy nomination shifted his image once again. Not only a big-screen star, but an actor powerful enough to dominate the small screen as well. In 1972, the ID television version of Madigan felt like a calculated risk. A character previously closed within cinema was revived and transported to Europe, Lisbon, London, its ambition obvious. It reached the Nielsen Top 20, yet it was still canceled after one season. A cruel contradiction of the entertainment industry. Quality does not always defeat time slots and cold decisions in boardrooms. Widmark understood that, and as time passed, he increasingly chose to appear as a guarantee rather than a star. In 1974, he joined Murder on the Orient Express, an ensemble packed with legends, yet Widmark was not dissolved into the crowd. He was the kind of presence that grew heavier the more restrained he became. And by the late 1970s, as Hollywood shifted toward disaster and thriller films, Widmark still held his ground in his own way. Roller Coaster, 1977, The Swarm, 1978, Coma. He did what few could do. He made situations that were almost too dramatic still feel real, because he performed as if everything were happening right in front of him. No room for acting to look good. Then in 1982, Widmark unexpectedly shifted into comedy in Hanky Panky, directed by Sidney Poitier, and his severity itself became the source of humor. The laughter came not because he tried to be funny, but because the character felt too real to be softened. But after everything, the most revealing moment came in 1987, when Widmark admitted he had begun to hate the filmmaking process itself. 12 hours, on set just to capture 2 minutes on screen, a kind of mechanical labor that had replaced the soul he once loved, back in the radio and Broadway years. From then on, Widmark entered a strange condition. The less he appeared, the more he was mentioned. The farther he moved from his golden era, the more his old noir roles were pulled back up and worshipped. He didn't grow old inside cinematic memory. He sank into it like an underground current, and that current, with time, only became more haunting. Widmark's exhaustion in the late 1980s did not come only from the mechanical rhythm of filmmaking, the endless long days on set, or the feeling that cinema had lost the magic he once believed in. It also came from something far more private, because behind every role, behind every shift of fame, he still lived like a man who was only truly at peace when he returned home. And Richard Widmark's home, for most of his life, had only one name: Jean Hazelwood. Jean entered his life not through Hollywood glamour, but through the smell of script paper, through nervous rehearsals at Lake Forest College, where Widmark once thought he would become a lawyer, where he tried to look serious and composed, hiding that strange trembling inside him whenever he stepped onto a stage. John was a drama student, and like him, belonged to a world of dialogue, breath, and emotion disciplined into shape. She didn't overwhelm him with cinematic romance. She gave him something else: order. Someone who understood his silences, his strictness, even his fear of being judged, as a small-town boy suddenly craving a different kind of life. Their bond formed in a way that suited Widmark perfectly. Not loud, not performative, but steady, like a decision. In those years, Widmark had to prove himself to friends, to family, and most of all to himself, that choosing art was not an impulsive mistake. Jean was a rare kind of emotional anchor. She didn't push him to become a star. didn't turn ambition into pressure. She simply stayed, quietly accompanying him so he could move forward without feeling ashamed of his own vulnerability. From the campus, to the stage, to the day he gathered all his courage and went to New York, Jean remained the thread connecting the man Widmark to the dream Widmark. On April 5, 1942, not long after America entered World War II, they married in Evanston, Illinois, Jean's hometown. It was a wedding with no name polishing, no publicity, no theatrical vows. Widmark entered marriage the way he entered an oath of honor. While so many Hollywood romances began in fireworks and ended in ash, their marriage felt more like a home built from decent habits, respect, privacy, and never allowing outsiders the right to interfere. People often call it a scandal-free marriage, but that phrase is too shallow, because that absence of scandal was itself a discipline of living, something not everyone in Hollywood could endure. In 1945, their only child was born, Anne Heath Widmark. As Widmark began to rise as noir's shocking new face and Fox pushed him into the front line, his life was pulled into an unfamiliar vortex. Contracts, shooting schedules, promotion, premieres where people stared at him like an icon. Jean remained behind that picture, protecting the ordinary life Widmark needed so he wouldn't be devoured by his own image. He later named his production company Heath Productions, not as a PR gesture, but as a way of stamping family into career, a reminder that everything he did still had to lead back home. A 55-year marriage cannot be free of tight, suffocating days. Widmark's years racing between film sets and success were years Jean lived with absence. The particular loneliness of a star's wife, not lacking money, not lacking fame, only lacking a man who was there at the right moments. Widmark was not the kind of husband who loved through sweet words. He loved through responsibility, through loyalty so stubborn it could feel rigid. That rigidity could be suffocating at times. He liked control, routine, order, quiet. Jean, as an artist, may have needed softer sharing. Yet Widmark's difficulty came with one thing Jean could trust for life. He didn't live a double life. Hollywood could change partners by the role. Widmark did not change people in his private world. Their family slowly formed into a small fortress away from the noise. The more famous Widmark became, the deeper he retreated into privacy, choosing calm spaces, silent days, rather than parties. Anne grew up in a house where her father spoke little, but was present in his own way, where her mother understood boundaries and protected the family from being burned by the spotlight. Widmark treated being at home like a mission as serious as standing before a camera. The greatest tragedy of this marriage did not come from betrayal or divorce. It came from the slow collapse of memory. In 1990, Jean was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. For many stars, that could have been the moment to hand everything over to nurses and institutions, then continue living their own lives. Widmark chose the opposite. He withdrew from acting to care for his wife full-time. The man who once froze audiences with a mad laugh now had to learn how to live with the most silent fear of all: watching the person he loved disappear, piece by piece, right in front of him. Illness pulled their marriage into a different kind of trial. No longer distance caused by work, but distance caused by the mind itself. Widmark watched Jean gradually forget familiar things, forget old routines, forget even the details that once made them. Those 7 years held no sensational tragedy, only a long, drawn-out pain. Day after day, a man aging in silence, caring while enduring helplessness, protecting his wife's dignity, squeezing down his own panic so it wouldn't become a burden to their daughter. On March 2nd, 1997, Jean died in Santa Barbara, California. Widmark did what he always believed a husband was supposed to do: stay until the end. After that, many things became meaningless in the most real way. A large house no longer felt like a place to return to. The quiet pieces of land, once called paradise, turned into emptiness. He sold the Hidden Valley Ranch only months after Jean's death, because a man like Widmark understood something painfully well. Keeping a place that once held happiness is sometimes not a way to continue living, but a way to be slowly crushed by memory. If audiences once saw Widmark's frustration with the profession as exhaustion from filmmaking's grueling process, underneath lay something deeper. Cinema gave him fame, but Jean gave him a life. And when Jean was gone, what remained wasn't simply losing a wife in the ordinary sense. It was losing the only anchor that still made him want to stand under the lights. After Jean was gone, Widmark did not step into a reborn life, the kind of label the press loves to attach to famous widowers. He stepped into a long silence, one that only makes sense if you have ever witnessed a soulmate lose memory before losing breath. What remained around him then was not the spotlight, not fame, but a house that was too quiet, mornings that were too long, and the feeling that time no longer had any reason to run fast. And inside that emptiness, Susan Blanchard appeared as a very different kind of lifeline, not to replace Jean, not to erase the past, but simply to keep him from being drowned by it. Susan was not a stranger entering his life through burning passion. She had long been a family friend, close enough to understand what Widmark was like when the cameras were off, and she was sensitive enough to know that an aging widower did not need pity, and certainly didn't need anyone teaching him how to move on. Susan came with a layered history of her own, the daughter of Dorothy Hammerstein and the stepdaughter of Oscar Hammerstein II, a name that immediately evokes an aristocratic world of art, where everything is wrapped in politeness. She had once been married to Henry Fonda, which meant she had already lived through marriage beside a Hollywood symbol in a way few could survive, close enough to fame to understand it, yet never dazzled by it. So when Susan entered Widmark's late years, she brought no illusion of a legendary man. She understood that legends age, grow tired, endure sleepless nights, and carry memories that stab the chest. Widmark chose Susan, not because he wanted to restart youth, but because he needed a presence strong enough to endure his silence. The years of caring for Jean had trained Widmark to live like a guard, watching the breathing of the woman he loved, watching even his own collapse. When Jean died, there was no one left to care for, but the habit remained. A man who didn't know how to live for himself was suddenly thrown into freedom. Susan, in a very gentle way, brought him back into life. Not a glamorous life, but the simple life of someone who still needs to eat dinner with another person, needs a voice in the house, needs a hand placed on a shoulder at night. On September 27, 1999, Widmark married Susan Blanchard. He was 84, she was 71. The marriage surprised many because it came so late, yet it fit Widmark perfectly. Quiet, tidy, without noise. Widmark emphasized that Susan had always treated Jane kindly. This was not small talk. For Widmark, kindness toward Jean was the only true passport that could allow another woman to stand beside him. He wasn't the type to cut off the past to rush into the present. He carried the past like a body part. Susan accepted that, even respected it, because she understood. In the life of a man like Widmark, Jean was not merely a wife. Jean was the moral foundation, the home, the most beautiful memory. They moved to Roxbury, Connecticut, what Widmark had come to call quiet land. Their life had no children together, no young family to fill the house with noise. only two people aging side by side in a slower rhythm. Outsiders could mistake that for perfect peace, but in truth, marriage at that age always carries a specific fear. Health declines, dependence increases, illness arrives without warning. Susan stepped into Widmark's life when he already carried cracks that could never fully heal, grief for Jean, distance from the spotlight, exhaustion with the industry that made his name. To love a man like that means loving not only the light, but also the heavy, unjoyful parts, long stretches of silence that can feel suffocating. Susan was not a woman easily dissolved into someone else's shadow. She had her own foundation, social connections, and the pride of someone who had survived famous marriages while still standing. That sometimes created a quiet tension at home. Widmark loved order, hated display, preferred closed doors and a private world. Susan came from a world that understood etiquette, understood appearing in the right places at the right times. Their difficulty didn't come from scandal or loud fights, but from rhythm. Two independent people, two lifestyles molded over decades, learning again how to live together when time was no longer generous enough for many mistakes. And yet Susan gave Widmark a warmth that was different from Jean. Jean had walked with him through poverty and anonymity, understood him through the memory of youth. Susan understood him through the present, an aging man of silence, famous yet no longer wanting fame, once cast as a demon on screen, yet despising violence. In real life, once making the world fear Tommy Udo's laugh, yet now wanting only a quiet existence. Susan cared for him the way a seasoned woman cares for a seasoned man, not controlling, not preaching, simply staying close enough that he wouldn't be alone. In his final years, Widmark's health declined sharply. Around 2007, a serious fall weakened him more rapidly, compounded by spinal fractures or damage mentioned in the transcript, turning even small tasks into challenges. If Jean once made Widmark step away from the spotlight to become a caregiver, then in his late years, Susan became the one beside him in that role, a role without glamour, without applause, only patience and long days. Widmark is said to have died peacefully at his home in Roxbury on March 24th, 2008. But that peace did not arrive by accident. It was built by a woman who chose to stay until the last moment, within a marriage where age no longer made love a flame, but a steady warmth holding back the cold of an approaching end. Richard Widmark's legacy is not defined by dazzling numbers or shelves filled with trophies. In fact, by the measuring stick of awards, he remains the kind of artist people find surprising, a career spanning over 60 years, more than 60 or 70 films. Yet the greatest imprint came from the very first time he ever stepped onto the screen. And that is the paradox that defines Widmark. He didn't need many awards to become a standard. He became a standard by turning acting into an energy that never allows the audience to breathe easily. Tommy Udo alone in Kiss of Death is enough to place Widmark among those who changed the language of the Hollywood villain. Before him, evil was often packaged to remain palatable. After him, evil began to look more ordinary, smiling, yet cold, speaking softly, yet lethal. His feral laugh didn't only frighten audiences, it forced them to face a deeper fear. Violence can wear a calm face. The wheelchair scene wasn't merely shocking, it was a cultural crack, a signal that noir had entered a darker layer. And Widmark didn't remain trapped in that shadow. He repeatedly broke his own image, from the cold gangster in the street with no name, to the hunted desperation of night and the city, to soldiers, heroes, prosecutors, and men standing inside the era's moral wars. He didn't possess the safe appearance of a romantic idol, nor the recklessness to become a fashionable rebel symbol. Widmark chose a different road. the road of discipline, a masculinity that didn't need to show off yet always felt reliable, even when his characters were terrifying. If you've ever been haunted by Tommy Udo's smile, felt breathless watching Widmark run through the darkness of night and the city, or admired the moral authority in his most severe roles, leave a comment. Which Richard Widmark performance stayed with you the longest? And if you want to keep going deeper into Hollywood legends, into truths most people are afraid to touch, please like, subscribe, and stay with the channel for the next stories.